Hello, dear chess lovers. How well can you recover from your losses? Are you able to get the right lessons from the games that you lost painfully? That's the topic of today's episode, and I will demonstrate to you how 12-year-old Gukesh learned the right lessons from a very instructive loss, and only after 1 month he crushed a very strong player from the same opening. All right. So, why are we doing this? Because analyzing our games and our mistakes is one of the most effective ways to improve our game. Gukesh is a fighter. He qualified for the World Championship match, and it will be very interesting to watch his game against Ding Liren this year. So I'm also analyzing so many Gukesh games recently to track his development. How did Gukesh get better over time? That's the basic question of that series, and also it allowed me to find some of his gems as he was growing his chess as an 8-year-old, 10-year-old, and here 2018 is this year. He's only 12 years old. We'll analyze two of his games very soon and see how he improved his chess already in a month time, as you will see here today, guys. Okay? This episode will also interesting for London system players, how to play against the London system, and how to play against an isolated queen's pawn. Gukesh in the second game demonstrates us a beautiful way to handle against the RQP. All right, so the first game starts off with the London system, folks. Gukesh with the black pieces. His opponent is Christian Bauer, a very strong grandmaster, 2628 elo. Gukesh's elo was 2360 when this game was played. 2018. Okay, e3. Gukesh likes this setup, folks, with early e6. He doesn't mind his bishop gets blocked. He wants to quickly develop his king side and quickly play for the break c5. That's a very solid and sound system. But this game, Gukesh went wrong at some key moments and he got his lessons. Already here, knight c6 is slight inaccuracy. Let's put it that way, folks. Gukesh learned the right lessons from this mistake. It's not clear why this move should be a mistake. It looks like the most natural move. But later practice showed Gukesh that a much better setup for black is probably to do this knight d7 idea. Why? Because this knight c6 setup allowed white to fight for the e5 square. How? Because he plays bishop e5 and chases after that knight on c6, which is also preparing the break e5, and white messes up black's plans. If you look at black structure, folks, we are playing clearly for the break e6, e5 to fight for the center and to also liberate our bishop. But the knight on c6 is easily attacked by the bishop. Thus, white is gaining control of that key e5 square. e5 is the most important square at this setup, and white gets the upper hand for the entire game. So I want you to focus on the e5 square from now on, because Gukesh played knight e7, but as I mentioned, now it will be so difficult for black to play for the e6, e5 pawn break. And this is exactly why white was better, because the bishop on c8 is blocked, and this bishop is a much better piece in this very position. Okay, so we'll see how Gukesh improves on this idea on the second game. Gukesh took on d4, folks, but after e takes d4, white also opened up the e-file. It became a semi-open file, and later rook left options will also become possible on that file. Knight g6, Gukesh still wants to somehow play for this e5 break, but it won't be easy at all. White immediately blocks the break by playing knight e5, folks. And now you tell me whether we can take the knight on e5. Is it an okay move or a blunder? Yes, folks, if you take that knight, that will be a clear blunder because you allow a pawn fork and we're losing a piece. You don't want to give up your good bishop for that knight either, right? Because white will clearly have a good grip on e5, and with later on h4, h5 plans, right? They have a very nice play on the king side. We are left with a terrible French bishop on c8. Now we are playing a French pawn structure, by the way. Okay. Gukesh plays queen c7, folks. And white plays queen e2. Why? Because white is keeping the grip on the key e5 square. And here, Gukesh goes wrong. Knight d7 is a big mistake, and white punishes this mistake by the move bishop takes g6, h takes g6, and here, can you see white's next move? To take advantage of the fact that this bishop is semi-hanging, this queen can later join the attack on e6 and so on. Yes, folks, white played a very strong move, knight takes g6. This combination was missed by Gukesh when he played knight d7. Now, if you recapture that knight, folks, as I mentioned, queen takes e6, followed by taking on d6, and the position collapses for black. After knight g6, if you take on g3, can you tell me how should white play, folks? There's a very cute mate indeed. Knight e7 check, followed by h takes g3, and we see a beautiful Anastasia's mate on the board, right? So after hg, knight takes g6 is a very strong move, and white won a clear pawn, and basically black is no compensation because after knight e5, we are still left with a terrible French bishop. So the rest of the game is also quite instructive. The white player played very well to convert the advantage. He is not minding a piece trade, he's an extra pawn, and now he interestingly doesn't trade the queens here. He's keeping the queens on the board because the black king is less safe. And later stage is also very instructive. He doubles his rooks on the e file, right? It's a very simple plan actually. And black has zero counterplay. e5 will never be played because of white's control on that key square, and the rest is very easy for white. Indeed, white shows us one more beautiful combination after queen g4 and bishop d7. Maybe you can stop the video and find that beautiful combination for white that wins material. You're a great player, folks, if you play the move knight e5, and after takes on e5, rook f3, the queen is trapped. Incredible, right? Tactics favor good positions in chess. White had a great position, black's pieces were cramped, and white uses this by this cute short calculation, and black needs to give up the queen. That's how the game went. White is completely winning. I will show you how the game finished, folks. He's neutralizing that rook on the 7th rank. He doesn't mind piece trades on c7, and black will resign very, very soon, folks. After this moves, just show you very, very quickly how the game ended. Right, g6, and Gukesh resigned in this position. So going back to the key moment, this will be interesting segue for us to connect to the next game. Gukesh lost this game because his grip on e5 was reduced. Black could no longer play for the e5 break in this pawn formation, and this gave white an opportunity, right, to organize an attack on the king side by always keeping this bishop as a stuck piece. That's why Gukesh will give up on this knight e6 plan, and he will show us maybe better treatment for black in those structures in the next game. Now, 1 month after the first game, we are seeing how Gukesh improves on the same position. He's playing against a very strong player who also recently became a grandmaster, Kevin Goh from Singapore, I believe, right? Gukesh with the black pieces again. His rating is 2,401 when this game was played. 2018 April, okay, in Bangkok. c5, as always, Gukesh likes this setup, and here he changes his openings, right? In the last game, as you remember, he chose knight c6, but after bishop b5s, black grip on a5 wasn't so great. So here he's showing us maybe a better way to treat those middle games. Knight f3, which move does Gukesh play? Queen c7. Why? Because he wants to play knight d7, but that will be a blunder, right? So first he plays queen c7, he guards the bishop, the queen also, as you understand, right, eyes the very important e5 square, and now his development schema will be knight d7. That's it. That's the improvement of Gukesh after last loss. This is a much more harmonious setup for black compared to knight e6 line, because here every single piece, if you pay attention, is still supporting the e6, e5 pawn break. And that's exactly what black is playing for in this very structure. So keep this in mind, folks, please. If you're playing this system against London system, this is much more harmonious than knight c6 on the fifth move. Let's see how this game went. White player played e4. If he castled, then black is ready to play the move e5, right? Our grip in the center is so huge, and our bishop got liberated. Black has no problems whatsoever. See how the queen and the knight is supporting that e5 break. See how Gukesh was already ready in this position, right? In this position to play e5, or after takes, e5. So that's exactly why White wants to play e4 to change the structure, but this allows Gukesh to create an isolani on d4, right? So that's the drawback of White's setup. Now it gives us a chance to create an isolani. Queen b6, he first takes on d6. This will be a very, very bad move for White, because it allows queen b4 check, followed by capturing one of those pieces after bishop takes g3. Black is winning here. So after queen b6, White took on d6. But as I said, we are having an isolani structure. And when you're playing against the isolani, usually trading minor pieces is a very good thing. That's exactly why Gukesh first takes that knight. And here, maybe you can stop the video and find a good plan for black. You're a great player, folks, if you come up with the move knight f6 to chase the bishop from that diagonal, followed by b6. It's a beautiful move by Gukesh. This bad bishop will become a very, very good piece on this long diagonal, and black will put tremendous pressure on that isolani with this piece placement, right? Again, that's a bad IQP for White, because they are lacking enough pieces, and their central control and space advantage is not so meaningful in this position. There are so many scenarios where this pawn on d4 will simply be hanging and so on. And for the rest of the game, Gukesh shows us how to play against the isolated queen's pawn. That's a model game, by the way, guys. At the age of 12, Gukesh was playing a model game against the isolated queen's pawn. Knight e5, as Nimzowitsch says, first blockade, then attack and take that isolated pawn. And Gukesh is demonstrating nice ideas to us. Knight e7, the idea is to basically go and attack that IQP directly. Interesting, right? He doesn't want to only blockade, but also directly hit and take that weak pawn on d4. The bishop is an amazing creature on b7 as well. Rook d1, rook d8, very simple move by black. It doesn't take much effort to find those moves by black. Queen d5 forms the battery on this long diagonal, right? The white king is also not feeling so secure. So black has a clear edge, but of course it will take, effort to convert this position. Knight d6 is eyeing some nice squares like that. And after bishop g2 comes Gukesh's next move. Maybe you can guess the move, folks. The queen needs to leave that diagonal, and Gukesh plays the move queen b5. Why? Because we are playing against the IQP, and the queen trade is favoring us, right? Because after the queen trade, there'll be less dynamics left on the board, and we can slowly grind our way to hit that weakness on d4. Queen takes b5, knight takes b5. We ended up in this position, folks. And now after rook b3, Gukesh returns back to c7, because the key square is again the blockading square on d5. And again, if you just take a step back, black should be better because of a much better pawn structure and a clear weakness on d4. Knight h4. Here comes my question, folks. They are offering a bishop trade. Should we exchange on g2, or should we play bishop d5? Which exchange is preferable for black? You're a great player if you found Gukesh's move bishop d5. He's offering an exchange in its own terms. Why? Because if you take on g2, this terrible knight on h4, terrible knight on the rim comes back into the game, right? So this exchange would help that knight on h4. That's exactly why Gukesh offers a trade on d5. And now after knight takes d5, this knight on h4 remains to be a terrible piece, right? Small finesses like that. That's what positional chess is about. Accumulating those small advantages, right? Speaking to those pieces, seeing how that knight is badly placed and so on. Beautiful, beautiful. Knight f3, rook c8. Very simple chess, in fact, by Gukesh. a3, and here Gukesh makes a move that dominates that knight. You're a great player if you found the move f6. This f6 pawn is dominating that knight on f3, not giving it a chance to go to e5. Also, multi-purpose move, it invites king f7. h4, rook c2. As in it says, first you occupy the open file, then you invade the second or seventh rank. Gukesh plays beautiful chess here. Check, followed by rook c8. He wants to keep the rooks on the board because both of our rooks are better than the white counterparts. See how badly placed the rook on the b3 is. The rook does nothing on that square. That's why it wants to improve, but still, the rook on d3 remains to be a terrible piece. So if you just purely watch the piece activity and coordination, right, black is better. Black is also better in terms of pawn structure. So these two factors are giving black a clear edge. Rook b1 is nice because there are a couple of ideas, right? Hitting the pawn, but also rook c1. Knight g1, king f7, folks. Very simple chess. Knight e2. And here, h6 was chosen by Gukesh. And here comes a mistake by white. White should have played the move knight f4, folks. This move looks so ugly because why do we accept such terribly weak pawns like that? Well, because after that knight disappeared, white is playing for d5. Knight f4 is a great move because white is removing the blockade on d5 and thus activating their terrible rooks. Now no one can stop the break d5 and this will give those rooks enough activity to fight for equality for white. Instructive moment, guys. This was white's maybe only chance to play for a draw, maybe save the draw in this position. It looks so ugly, but piece activity is more important than structure in chess. Okay? Instead, white chose the move h5, and now Gukesh is getting ready to exchange on his own terms. The king is getting ready to go to d6, and after takes on d5, the king will replace that knight on d5. Thus, black will keep the blockade. Thus, black will keep those rooks terribly stuck on the d file. Rook f3, rook e1. Hitting that knight, poking the position. Knight f4, and now comes Gukesh's choice, king d6, as I say. He says, if you take that knight, then my king will improve and I will keep the blockade on that pawn on d4, which means your rooks are still terribly stuck. Compare the black rooks with the white rooks. Compare the black king with the white king, and you will understand why black is having a clear advantage in this endgame. Isn't it like a lovely model game, folks, by the way? I'm enjoying this game a lot so far. I hope you do as well. Rook f4, one more piece to trade, right? Gukesh says, well, very simple idea, right? Very simple idea, in fact. If you take that rook, then my king improves, and now my rook is much better than your rook. I will invade. Maybe I will simply do this and take that pawn. White cannot hold this endgame, in fact, guys. Okay? So rook e4 is a very nice simplification move that also exploits the weakness on d4. King f3, exchange on f4, and Gukesh plays the move a5. Space gaining move. Maybe he will go a4 and freeze the weakness on b2. White has no counterplay. Please compare the rook's activity, folks. Rook c2, very nice, right? Invading the second rank. Rook b3, and now comes the calculation process. Gukesh takes on d4, and after f3, well, white plays f3 in the game, because if you take on b6, then you allow check, followed by e5, and no one can stop this e pawn anymore. It's extremely fast, pass pawn, and the king is also super active. White has no chance. White king is cut off, right? Terrible. This is completely lost for white. So after king takes d4 here, white played f3, but very quickly the game come to an end because now black is a clear extra pawn. He won the second pawn, and the white player resigned in this position. So can you understand Gukesh's nuance here? He quickly understood the basic mistake from last game, and he improved with the move bishop d6 in this position. Later on, he also won many games in this very position by playing this setup for black. It's a structural idea. Black's entire plan is to be able to play e6, e5 ASAP, and he wants all of his pieces to be harmoniously placed to support this break. And in fact, black is completely fine in those positions. Already here, as I mentioned, e5 becomes an option, right? Black wants to go e5 on the next turn. And it's not clear how white is preventing that idea. Also, this game nicely shows us those possible transformations of the pawn structure in this system and how we can play against the isolani on d4, as we quickly saw in this game, right? Those structures are very, very typical, and Gukesh demonstrated a beautiful middle game understanding from this structure. Going back to the first game, folks, the problem with queen c7 here is that it allows d takes c5, right? So black cannot choose the same structure against this plan of bishop b5. After knight c6, we can no longer play for the same idea as Gukesh has played for in the second game, right? So such nuances, such small differences can mean a lot, because e5 is the break that will give black equality. If you can't play e5, if you let white dominate that e5 square, then it will always be slightly worse in those positions, as this game has shown us, right? I hope you enjoyed this lesson, folks. Does it speak to you? Do you ever play this system against the London system with black? Do you have any experience about this particular position with black? Do you know, for example, why bishop d6 might be a better move than knight c6? I hope I clarified for you in this game, because Gukesh definitely understood the right lessons and he never repeated the move knight c6 after this game. As far as I could see, he always chose the setup with bishop d6, queen c7, and knight d7 followed by e5. This also nicely shows us how openings are connected to middle games in chess, right? That's how you always want to learn openings, always by connecting to the middle game ideas. Why are they playing the move? Why are they choosing the setup with black? That's the right formula to have deeper engagement, so your memories will consolidate and you will keep that knowledge in your brain for a long, long, long time, right? That's why I talked about this e5 outpost, the key square being e5 and the key break being e5. That will shape your entire piece placements in the middle game with black. Even that connects to the why question, because we want to get rid of this terrible bishop. We want to activate that bishop. We also want to fight for the center. Yeah, so the focal point clearly becomes e5 in this very setup, and I hope the lessons are clear that this is a better option for black to support the e6 e5 pawn break. I hope I also gave you a great tool, another great tool to fight against London. I made one more video about how to strategically crush the London system, so that's our second tool in our disposal to beat those London players. Thank you so much.